Robots Radio presents...
Hey everybody, welcome into the podcast. We are back with another special bonus episode. Today we are continuing our My Favorite Movie series, and we have on the line with us, all the way from Tennessee, Tim Piersant, who is the CEO and co-founder of Chattanooga Whiskey. Tim, how are you today?
What up, everybody?
I can already tell that Tim is going to fit in quite well here on the Film and Whiskey podcast.
Yeah.
No, I'm to answer your question seriously, I'm doing fine. Thank you for asking.
All right, so Tim, I just want to say up at the front, we've had a lot of distilleries on the podcast doing interviews, and they're always kind enough to send us samples. I have to say, your team at Chattanooga sent us what is by far the best sample package we have ever received.
And that is the best compliment I've ever received. So thank you.
Honestly,
it doesn't get any better than that.
I got the shipping confirmation from FedEx, and I think it said it was like 9 pounds. I thought you shipped me like a severed head or something. I didn't know what was going to go on with this. I got home and I saw these two beautiful bottles of Chattanooga 91 and 111. And man, I can't wait to get into talking about this product with you today, Tim.
I appreciate that. We most of the time the packaging and everything that goes into it is worth sharing. That's why we don't like to package it up into little sample bottles and send it out that way. So, but I'm glad that you guys really liked it. It's awesome.
So, Tim, why don't you walk us through a little bit of the history of Chattanooga whiskey? You guys are making huge waves right now in the bourbon world. We're on Instagram a lot, and we see your product popping up all over the place. It seems like you're really building a following for a craft distiller. Can you take us back to how it started?
2011 is when we began. We were inspired by the history of whiskey in Chattanooga. When I say we, it was me and my co-founder. The history of whiskey is very deep in Chattanooga. Pre-Prohibition, it was illegal to distill here in most of the state of Tennessee. So we had to lobby to change those laws. We created a campaign called the Vote Whiskey Campaign that took 2 years. It was in 2013 that bill was signed. Out of the 95 counties in Tennessee, the majority of them opened up to distilling for the first time since Prohibition. 2 years after those laws changed, we were successful in building the first distillery in Chattanooga since 1915, and that was in 2015, so exactly 100 years. And then that became the Chattanooga Whiskey Experimental Distillery, which is where we began exploring basically specialty malts in bourbon, along with several other processes such as longer, colder fermentation, lots of different types of yeasts, different barrel finishes. And throughout that process of experimenting with bourbon, we established what is now known as the only Tennessee high malt whiskey, and that's the style of bourbon whiskey that Chattanooga Whiskey produces. We established one of the larger craft distilleries in 2017 that's about a mile away from the experimental distillery, so both are located in downtown Chattanooga. That is called the Riverfront Distillery. That's where we produce our flagships, which, again, came from the Barrel 91 recipe. What you guys received was Chattanooga Whiskey 91 and Chattanooga Whiskey 111, which are both from that Barrel 91 recipe out of experimental. So now we're just hammering away at Chattanooga Whiskey 91 and Chattanooga Whiskey 111. And those are 4-grain bourbons. Again, we call them Tennessee high malt because of the high specialty malt content. So there's, out of the 4 grains, 3 of the grains are specialty malts. So you've got a nice foundation of non-GMO yellow corn that's exclusively grown in Tennessee. And then on top of that, you've got malted rye, caramel malt barley, and honey malt barley. So it's very unusual. 4 grains are fairly rare. They're becoming more popular in the industry, but 4 grains made up of 3 specialty malts is very rare. And then, we go above and beyond that to bring out kind of the rich and complex flavors that come from a 4-grain 3-malt recipe. It's been a fun 8-year journey with lots of ups and downs, but more ups than downs. And now we're just trying to spread the word, spread the product. And so far it's going well.
That's awesome. I feel like there's so many different directions that we can go in terms of asking follow-up questions. But before we do that, Brad and I have actually poured out the 91 and the 111 to sample while we're on air here. Brad, do you want to give any notes on this Chattanooga 91?
Man, at a very basic level, I opened this up and, we started with the 91 and then moved to the 111. And I just thought that this was a beautiful whiskey. There's so much going on. Like you said, that high malt really gives it a depth and a complexity to it that I was really surprised by.
So the way that we like to kind of think about it is with a traditional straight bourbon whiskey that has traditionally 3 grains in it, which is usually corn, rye, and a little bit of malted barley, or corn, wheat, and a little bit of malted barley. And then, of course, aged in a 53-gallon, new American white oak barrel with a char on the inside of it for greater than 2 years. That's what makes up straight bourbon whiskey. Specialty malts and the additional steps that we do in the process create really more a richer flavor. So traditionally, bourbon is sweet. The corn makes up a lot of that sweetness. And then rye is usually spicy. If it's a wheated bourbon, it might be a little softer, maybe not quite as much flavor as rye. But then the malted barley is really just used for enzymes and breaking down starches for fermentation, et cetera. And utilizing a high level of specialty malts creates a richer flavor in the sense that it has depth of flavor, meaning it's kind of darker, it's roastier, it's toastier. The caramel notes are darker, more butterscotchy. Sometimes you get more of a chocolate note out of it. You might get a hint of smoke. So there, maybe raisins, kind of French toasty. Basically, all these kind of the deeper roasty toasty notes that you don't get out of a traditional bourbon whiskey. That's what we love about what we make.
I was taking notes on, what I was getting on the palate when I was trying, especially the 111, and it ended up reading like a grocery list because it reminded me of so many different things, and it was bringing up like flavors from my childhood. I wrote down like Honey Smacks cereal at one point.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. But the one note that I kept taking, when I first got the bottle, I popped it open and tried it immediately, and it's probably been, 5-6 weeks since then, and it still has, and I can't get over it. It smells like a piece of caramel cheesecake. It has this incredible like creaminess to it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. And then you give it a sip and I can taste it on the flavor too. I don't know how else to describe the smoothness of this 111 aside from it just has this sweet cream to it.
Yeah, man. That's what we love about it. Is again, it just has a richness and a depth. I personally love cheesecake, so that resonates with me for sure. But I haven't had it since I had a neighbor when I was a kid that every time my brother or I were sick, she would make us cheesecake. So like I haven't had I don't think I've had cheesecake since then, but like for 15 years, 16 years of my life, every year I think I'd intentionally get sick like 3 or 4 times just to have her cheesecake. So yeah, I'll take the cheesecake note all day.
We've had quite a few distilleries come on the podcast, and, Brad and I kind of talk off air about what our personal favorites are. And we've had a couple that have been in like the $150 range, which are great bourbons, but, they're just not an everyday sipper. And when we got this 111, I was really reluctant to even give any to Brad, if I'm being 100% honest with you. I wanted to make him drive to Tennessee and just buy some for himself, because I honestly think that the 111 might be my favorite bourbon that we've ever had on this podcast.
Man, that is awesome. So for 7 years, leading up to, the release of Chattanooga Whiskey 91 and 111, which was back in August, we were selling a bourbon out of MGP. And in it, they make a really good bourbon. It's a 3-grain. It was 75% corn, 21% rye, and 4% malted barley. And it won lots of awards at competitions, tasting competitions. We, having to sell that for 7 years, while we were fond of it, I oftentimes went home, if I was going to drink a bourbon neat, it wasn't always 1816. It was, and I've got a little collection. I'm not a huge collector, but enough to where I really enjoyed trying other things. I would pour 4 rows of single barrel or something else, right? And I could make an argument that a lot of those bourbons were better than 1816. I think 1816 held its own and was better than a lot of bourbons out there. But now what's really fun about our jobs is that everything we've worked towards has really become our favorite. There's not another whiskey on the market that I enjoy drinking as much as 91 or 111, and not even close. So, I mean, I'm actually drinking 111 as I sit here and talk to you guys. It really is. It has a unique flavor profile that if you do a blind taste test, you can pick it out of a lineup really easily, which I love, because you can't do that with a lot of bourbons. I mean, a lot of bourbons. I don't care. You guys are mentioning, you talk about price points. Line up a really good portfolio of bourbons, everywhere from $25 to $125, and do a blind taste with somebody. And there's lots of nuances. You'll be able to tell differences. If you're drinking those bourbons all the time and comparing them, then you might know which one is which. But if you're the average consumer, you probably won't.
Yeah.
But if you stick Chattanooga whiskey, for example, if you stick Chattanooga whiskey 111 in there and you say, pick the one that is the most unique out of a lineup of straight bourbon whiskeys, it's going to be 111. It's got the most flavor. It's got the richest flavor. It's got the most depth. It stands out in a crowd, and often it wins.
Yeah, Tim, and I'm really curious. You've talked about this high, specialty malt grain bill in your whiskey, and I'm curious, if it's such a rare thing, where did your team come up with the idea to use this unique of a batch of grains?
It was inspired by our head distiller, Grant McCracken, who was formerly a brewer. He was a well-regarded brewer within the industry. I mean, he had just gotten his certification in distilling, and I think Grant saw an opportunity to be a part, a big part in developing a product in the bourbon industry that could really continue that trailblazing. And so he took a lot of his brewing knowledge, across the board, with grains, specialty malts, yeasts, fermentation, et cetera, and applied that right off the bat. And the nice thing was we had the experimental whiskey distillery that afforded us the opportunity to play, and had a I think more than a hunch that it would create a deeper, richer flavor profile, though he was still very new to the distilling industry. And as we distilled these things, the white whiskey coming off the still was very interesting. A lot of it that we liked, some of it that we didn't. And then once we began to, once we got them into barrels and began to taste them, after a few months and a year and a half, and then 2 years, just after a few months of tasting them as really the oak flavor set in, we realized that we were onto something really good.
Yeah, you certainly were. And Tim, I could sit here all day and talk about your bourbon, but I want to get a quick glance at the movie that you picked as your favorite movie. We try to marry this idea of film and whiskey on this podcast, and so we asked distillers to come on and talk about their favorite films in addition to their whiskeys. And I was really, really pleasantly surprised to see what you chose to talk about today. So why don't you tell our listeners what movie we're going to be discussing?
First of all, how can you be pleasantly surprised if Christmas Vacation isn't in your top 4 movies of all time? Then you have no sense of humor whatsoever, none. Or maybe you're not a big family guy. Who doesn't sit with their family at some point and watch Christmas Vacation? And if you haven't, please start the tradition now, because it's going to bring your family closer together.
That's the best endorsement anyone could possibly give this movie, I think. I don't even know if we need to talk about it.
It just hits home with me. It makes me feel like I'm laying on the den floor with my brother and my parents growing up as a kid. It was a tradition, Christmas Eve, man, for 18 years in a row. So
the thing about Christmas Vacation that I really like, I'm a huge fan of the first Vacation, where they go to Wally World, but that movie is it's very R-rated. And
oh man, it's so not PC. It's hilarious.
No. You
look at that and you're like, you know what? I don't even think they would make a movie like that anymore.
Oh, there's no way. But that's the thing about Christmas Vacation is, like you said, I know kids that watch Christmas Vacation. It's of that series, it's the one that the whole family can get behind for sure.
Oh yeah, totally. And everybody has an Uncle Eddie. So, in their lives somewhere.
All right, so Tim, if you had to pick one scene from that movie that just always gets you when you're watching it at Christmas time, what would be your favorite scene from that movie?
So this is, if my dad ever listens to this, he's going to laugh. But there's a lot of things about about Clark that reminded me of my father. You know, I could just like totally like putting up the Christmas lights and putting up the Christmas tree. You know, I mean, I think I probably it's such a quotable movie that, you know, little fool, a lot of sap. I mean, I don't even know how many times I've said that. Thousands of times. Like, little fool, a lot of sap. I was in the woods the other day and I was like, oh, you know, no, I wasn't. I was on a golf course and I really had to pee and it was out in the open and there was like one little pine tree over there. And one of the guys was like, just get as close. There were houses around everything. Like, just get as close to the center of that pine tree as you possibly can, and no one will see you. And I get in there, and while I'm in there, and I'm like, little fool, a lot of sap. But so, I don't know. Probably when Cousin Eddie goes in. I said Uncle Eddie here, but Cousin Eddie goes in and kidnaps his boss, and he goes absolutely, you know, ape in the living room. In the process, because I can identify with that.
Hopefully you're not.
I am. I'm talking about. I guess I'm talking about myself. I guess. I mean, you know. But no, it's just funny. It's his sense of humor and how he's like, you know, he's handy. He's smart and he's handy, but he's not handy. And it's like why he tries to fix things break. The Piersant family can identify with that very closely. So
we had the same thing growing up. Like anytime something would break down on our car, you know, my mom would just be like, "Well, here comes the Griswolds again."
My dad is an amazing man. You know, I look up to him greatly. But he's a big car guy too, and he always had like a hot rod in the garage that he was always working on. And there was one day that something went wrong with the hot rod, and our family stood in the kitchen and we watched every single item inside the garage fly out of the garage into the backyard. So you know, it was a Christmas vacation moment, and I'm guilty of many myself. So.
Yeah, and what I love about National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation is that, like you said, not only is it a comedic classic, but it really does lean into the essence of Christmas, that no matter what your family does, they're still your family, and you spend Christmas with them. And it's just a great way to bring, you know, the people who mean the most to you together. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Another, you know, when all the family is together, you just, you know, you guys, you're in it thick and thin.
So you said that your dad reminds you a lot of Clark Griswold, but who are you in this situation? Are you the boss that gets kidnapped?
No, man. No, that's definitely not me, but I am familiar with the boss that gets kidnapped. That's kind of, that whole culture is a dying culture. Thank God. So there's not as many of those, or at least they don't last very long if there are. Man, if I don't know if I can. I guess I can identify as Clark's son in some ways, but I don't know if I identify with the character on there.
Well, hey, that's okay, because I mean, I think all the characters have at least one huge drawback to them, so that's all right.
But yeah. I love what you were saying about, you know, the state of the industry and the culture of things like that now, because we really do see this happening with a lot of craft distilleries that we've interviewed, is that there's this groundswell happening in the distilling world, and it is earmarked by experimentation and openness and transparency. And it just really seems like, you know, the culture is shifting, and it's an exciting time for us, you know, to be doing what we're doing. And I hope it's this, that you feel the same way as the leader of a craft distiller.
Yeah, transparency and authenticity are more important. It's also, which I think is really good, it's challenging people to put out higher quality products because it starts with passion, right? If you're just trying to make money and that's the end game, then usually the passion is not there. That's a lot of that has shifted, I think, in a very good way. So the bosses are, you know, not so prevalent anymore. I mean, again, and I can only really speak to my experience, but I just know that we have so many talented, unique, passionate individuals. If it weren't for their, you know, individuality and how they're uniquely passionate and skilled in what they do about what we do, then we wouldn't be where we are today. And I just can't imagine. I mean, there's just absolutely no way that we'd be here without that passion all the way through the organization.
Tim, as we kind of wind down this interview, I do want to give you an opportunity. Is there anything that you'd like to get a plug in, for the distillery or any products that you might have coming out as we get into the holiday season?
I mean, I would say if you're looking to take a trip, come to the Chattanooga Whiskey Experimental Distillery. It's one of the top attractions in Chattanooga. Chattanooga is a beautiful town, and the flight is extra tasty, and the whole tour is very reasonable. And then, go check out our website. We have lots of information about our website, our history, the products we create. So go to ChattanoogaWhiskey.com, and then follow us on social media. Instagram is @ChatWhiskey, Twitter's @ChatWhiskey, Facebook, Chattanooga Whiskey.
Well, Tim, we're just so thankful that you took the time to chat with us. It's wonderful to talk about the importance of bringing family together, and then also to hear that about the family that you've built at Chattanooga Whiskey. It really does take so many special people to bring such a phenomenal product to market. So just thank you again. Thank you so much for coming on with us.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate you having me, and I'm really glad you guys enjoyed the product.
That has been Tim Piersant. He is the CEO, co-founder of Chattanooga Whiskey for the Film and Whiskey Podcast. I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
We'll see you next time.